Okay, so it's my favorite bit of the tutorial. It's the shootout comparison. We're first going to load up the OBX and Sonicprojects. Okay, now I've been experimenting with these four sounds, trying to get them as close as I can to each other, and it really seems like the OBX has different curves in the filter envelope, so you might notice that the decay amount is significantly more than the knobs show on the other examples, but that results in getting very close to the other sounds, so you might have to play around. It's quite crucial that you get the right decay amount on this particular patch. So we're going to go all the way from 0 on the envelope amount to full and then back again. Here we go. Okay, you can hear nice natural analog movement in that, really nice, and the envelope opens nicely so you can hear that nice buzzy top end, and we've got the key tracking on. So yep, pleased with that, and let's quickly go on to the Obsession. It's exactly the same modulation. Quickly show you there. Let's take these down to 0 so you can hear the full range, and okay, really nice. Again, it's got a really authentic analog feel, especially with the pitch. It's almost like it's kind of wandering a little bit, but sounds fantastic. And you'll notice, see the decay amount here, it's not nowhere near as high up on the visual knob as it is on the OBX, but it's probably the different curve there, but you can hear that they open very similarly. Okay, let's go on to Arturia's OBXA. Once again, just to show you, there are the filter envelope amount modulation envelope. So you're going to watch this knob over here. Here we go. Okay, now behavior wise, opening the filter is very similar, but for me that is more of a precise sound. I would describe that as sounding more like a fresh out of the factory calibrated OBXA compared to the other two, which you can hear some sort of analog imperfections, and I actually prefer the Arturia. I know that some of the analog artifacts give it character to the sound, but really I like it nice and precise, with just a tiny bit of analog feel maybe. That's just me, so I really like that sound. And of course you've got the option to grunge up the sound a little bit and make it more analog if you wish, which is always nice, especially using the modulation matrix. Okay, let's go on to a completely different filter architecture, the ANA 2. Let's see how close we can get to those sounds, and if you see here, the envelope amount is completely on 0, so just watch that knob there. Okay, now we're choosing the 4-pole vintage to get as close as we can to the Oberheim 4-pole that is used in the other examples, but it's not quite as buzzy, which I expected. Maybe the curves making it the envelopes a bit too fast as well, so might have to slow up those envelopes. But again, the basic raw waveforms absolutely fine, and I think with a bit of tweaking you could get even closer. I've really subtly got some modulation on the panning as well to add a kind of movement similar to the other Oberheim examples. So Anna 2, once again, you can get extremely close despite it being completely different architecture, being a wavetable based synth. Now, the reason I chose this plucky patch is because I was working on a similar kind of patch and I was experimenting with some delays and reverbs, and you really get to hear, funnily enough, some of the character in these plucky sounds when you add lots of reverb and delay. So I've got some really nice UAD plugs here. I've got the wonderful Korg, traditional Korg digital delay, nice vintage unit, and I've got the very lush ambient sound of the AMS RMX16 reverb. So check it out. You can hear the differences even more now when I play it through those effects. Yeah, as I expected, just softening up the attack on the amplitude envelope gets Anna closer to those softer, pluckier sounds, the slower envelopes of the Oberheim. So, yep, you can hear how lush that sound gets once you put it through some nice effects. So let's move on to the next audio example. Okay, for the next audio example, I've chosen a template for a pad. I haven't done anything fancy with the stereo spread or individual voice tunings, which will enable us to just hear the raw waveforms going into the filter and the envelopes, so we can try and match them as close as possible. The OBX, first of all. This kind of pad sound was one of the best uses, I think, of Oberheims of this period. I had an OB8 for about 18 months from 1992 onwards, and it was absolutely massive. I couldn't find anywhere to put it in my studio at the time. Nothing was strong enough to hold it, and I really didn't have anywhere else to put it but the floor. So when people used to come to the studio, they had to step over this massive keyboard. Beautiful OB8, but it really was too big. It was quite reliable though, but what I really liked to do was play these thick chords and just whack up the release and play around with the filter cutoff. You can hear a track of mine, Return to Taklamakan, and the whole intro is just me doing precisely that. A really thick Oberheim OB8 pad and me opening the filter cutoff. Beautiful sound. So I have a pretty good idea, even though it was almost 30 years ago, what these should sound like. I had a Oberheim Matrix 1000 as well, so these pads are what I think Oberheims are really strong at. Let's play this one. Yeah, really lovely sound, and of course that is just the basic, no stereo effects or anything, no effects whatsoever on that. Let's quickly go into Obsession and see if our pad template has as much potential as that OBX Pro. It really does have a lot more movement to my ears, the Obsession. It's almost like there's some modulation going on. But if we go into the modulation matrix, everything is off. All the delays, reverb and chorus is off. It really is just the detuning of oscillator 2. You can see here the LFOs, they're not modulating anything. The depths are right down. Here the depth is up, but it's not actually going to the pulse width of any of them. They're in sawtooth mode. Anyway, so yeah, that's a really beautiful sound by the Obsession. Let's quickly go into the Arturia, the OBXA. Once again, same sound. Okay, so you noticed I was playing with the detune a little bit there, and once you start adding a bit more detune of oscillator 2, you start to get that movement that we heard in Obsession. So perhaps we can do that to the OBX Pro, start detuning and getting those wonderful movement from the beating of the oscillators. Okay, so the Anna, what you're going to watch for here is, let's try and get some of that movement with the beating using the fine tuning of the second oscillator. You can play around with the curves when you have the time, and I'm sure you can really get in the ballpark there. They are very flexible indeed. Not only do you have the curves, of course, but you can really fine tune these attacks. So one of the great things, by the way, let me just say this, I wish everyone, all manufacturers could do this. If I get the OBX VA and I press on the attack time of the envelope, you see 1.110 seconds, and then you click on that and there you go, 1.11. So we can totally match the attacks using the readouts decay, 1.6 seconds. You go there, 1.6. That's just amazing for matching up patches anyway. So I wish everyone would do that. Anyway, on to Anna. So watch out for the fine as we try and get this to add a bit of movement. There you go. You can see you can get the fine tuning on that second oscillator to add the nice movement with the beating, and then open the filter, and yeah, you can match the envelopes perfectly to the OBXA anyway because of the readouts, and it's all about getting that curve absolutely perfect, and you can do a really good emulation of the Arturia. Okay, so let's go back to OBX, and what I've done here is add some spread in the oscillator tuner section, and also increase the oscillator to detuning on this section, and I've also added a little bit very slow LFO to the filter modulation, a nice sine wave so it's barely perceptible, opened up the cutoff a little bit, halved the amount of the oscillator 2 going into the filter, and straight away just with these few tweaks you can get that nice lush sound, and I'm sure you can spend hours delving into all the different settings on this incredibly deep soft synth OBX from Sonicprojects, but you can get great pad sounds. Big difference with the legato on and off, and no voice layering. As you can see when you go along, all these light up. So you can see there 5, 4, 4, 5 notes is the most we've got there. So you can see we started off with a pretty basic patch, and you can see the potential there once we start adding some nice effects, and then we can play with each individual voice. You can get something close to a patch. Like if we go to Obsession here, let's choose what we base this patch on, very basic version, but if we go to Exploring Space, I'm going to take off the chorus and the reverb, but I'm going to leave everything as is. They've added a bit of a bandpass filter here, which you can also do in the OBX Pro and mix it, so you can really get close to this with that synth as well. Let's take the volume down a touch. Single mode and 8 voices. Same again, if you look at the active voices, there's no voice stealing going on. If you do even thicker chords and you find there's some voice stealing, just go up to 16 voices. Here you've got voice adjustment edit. Look at that, the control you've got is absolutely insane. So yep, can't beat it. The depth of those two plugins in particular, quite amazing. Right, for our final audio example, I've got a slightly more complex patch, and it makes for a really nice halfway house between a sort of bass sound without getting too subby, and also a nice lead sound. It's kind of like a lower mids, and it's got a little bit more movement. We've added some LFO modulation into the patch, so you can see here we've got very subtle modulation of the frequency of oscillator 1, which is now a square wave, and we're also modulating with that same LFO rate the pulse width, which we've offset a little bit to begin with. And if you look over to our filter, you can see we've got both oscillator 1 and 2 going fully on, and the key tracking is pretty much fully on. We're also modulating the filter frequency by that same LFO depth as we're modulating oscillator 1 pitch. We've got the default settings of the oscillator tuning, so everything should be pretty precise. And obviously this is your starting point, and then you've got all these lovely controls to go in depth and start adding lots of analog randomness. We've got a little portamento on here as well, just so you can hear the portamento action. Let's hear the OPX. I'm going to be adjusting the cutoff just so you can get some variation. Lovely. See the subtle modulation when you don't go too crazy. It adds a real nice thickness, especially with the pulse width modulation. It adds that kind of nice crunchy top to what could be a really solid bass line, especially if you started adding a sub under there as well. So yeah, really nice. That's the OPX. Let's go to Obsession. Okay, so next we've got the OBX-A. Okay, and you can see the similarities between the OBX-A and the Obsession, and I think that I'm making my mind up which is my favorite out of those two. The OPX I really like. It's a lot more raw, and that's probably because it's based more upon the original OBX than the OBX-A. Okay, let's see how close Anna can get. Now, we don't actually have any square waves of the Oberheim as available to us as wavetable, so I've just chosen a regular square. I've offset the pulse width and modulate it exactly the same with the same LFO, so everything should be matched. You go into the mod settings there. Also, we've still got that slight oscillator pan, so we can get slight movement in the stereo field, just like we have for all the others. And again, we can wonderfully match the envelope times with OBX-A because they have the same measurement system. And let's go. again, very close. We've done a really good job, especially with the curves there. I spent a bit more time adjusting those curves, and it seems to be around the 1 or 2 o'clock mark that closely resemble the curves of the Oberheim envelopes. So yep, getting very close there, especially to the kind of gnarly top end of the Obsession. Okay, let's just hear how glorious these sound through a nice spring reverb. We've got the UAD AKG spring reverb, which is one of the nicest software spring reverbs I've got in my arsenal here. So let's quickly see how lush they sound through these. Lovely, and the Obsession. Pull the portamento down a bit. Nice, the portamento's really nice control over that portamento. You can really go subtle in the beginning of the range there. Let's try and mess around with the portamento here too. Not so subtle there, it goes from small amounts there and then it goes fairly extreme pretty quickly. To watch the portamento on the Arturia, so a lot more stronger in the early range of the control. Finally we go back to our Anna, which we did a pretty good job with on this patch. Let's take down the envelope on that. I really like the portamento on this. Get right down into the milliseconds. There we go. Ease off on the drive. More of a pure sound. Great, okay, well, I've pretty much made my mind up. I do think if you're pushed and you already have Anna in your arsenal, you can get really close to these. And if you do want to go in for a new one, well, it's a close one, but I'll announce it in the conclusion after this.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!